Hey everyone, my name is Matt. Welcome to my shop. So 4 years ago I made a bunch of these larger Endgrain cutting boards, and unfortunately a few of them have cracked. I had made them and then I stacked them just like this on the ground over in the corner of the shop, and a bunch of them have cracks that are kind of emanating from the outside. I think what just happened there is they were drying out from the outside going in, and the middle just didn't let the whole thing come together. It went pop, and there's some cracks in some of them. So I thought this would be a fun opportunity to finish these up and do something a little bit different, since I haven't actually made cutting boards in 4 years, is to make some chaos boards. So for that, you essentially take a completed board like this, then you cut it up at some kind of weird angle and glue it back together. The more times you do that, the more chaotic the pattern gets. So yeah, we'll see what happens and where it all kind of leads us. Now I am going to miss this extra ballast in the bottom of my workbench, but I should be able to reclaim that for some actual usable storage space. So of course, who would I be to deprive you of all the video of getting these things to this point? So let's jump back in time a little bit, and a younger me is gonna kick things off. So I just got finished with a trim project. I made and installed all my own trim, so I have a whole bunch of offcuts and scraps that I need to find something to do with. So I have the offcuts from actually making the trim, I have the offcuts from installing the trim, and I have the original trim from the room, which is maple. So usually what I do with my offcuts and scraps is I make them all into cutting boards like these. Now for this project, I'm going to do cutting boards as well, but this time with all of this stuff, I want to get through it quickly, so I'm going to make some bigger ones. The ones I normally make are 12 by 16. I'm going to try and make something more like 16 by 24, and these ones are normally 1 inch and 5/8 thick, but I think I want to make something thicker, like maybe 2 inches, so something really big and beefy, like some Super XL cutting boards. So first step is going to be to get these things all planed down, and I'm going to cut them down to a more manageable length, and then start gluing these things up into blanks. I planed the baseboards, and they got me to about 2 inches wide of this flat area at about maybe 3/8 of an inch thick. So I have a pretty good amount of material here. So my original thought was to take these pieces here and rip them into narrower strips so I could glue on, where's my pieces here? So I can glue on strips like these that I had from cutting or making the moldings and cutting them to size. But I don't really want to do that. So then I thought I could just glue all these together and get a big blank out of these, and that would work. However, I think it's gonna be a little boring because it's gonna be a bunch of maple strips together. So what I'm gonna do is I pulled a few extra boards. I have some boards that got cut kind of weird by the sawmill, so these are a little thin. I also have a few pieces of flooring for my flooring project that I can get rid of as well. So I'm going to start planing these down, and I'll mix these into the strips here. So these would be planed down and then cut to about 2 inches wide to be sandwiched between all of these pieces of trim. And then I'll have one big blank. I can run that and flatten it all in one go, and then I can plane away all of the rest of the profile on top of the moldings. So this blank, I didn't have enough pieces long enough to make up a full 16-inch wide blank. So what I did is glue up about 9 inches wide worth of stock here. So then I could take some of these things, which are much thinner. I have these thinner strips. So what I could do with these is stack them together, and then I'll glue both of these 2 stacks together, and then glue this whole thing to here. And I have one for the other side, and that'll give me my full 16-inch wide width. So now that I have my blanks all glued up, they can be flattened and plane to thickness to get rid of all that excess material. These blanks are all going to be wider than my jointer, so I'll use the hangover method to flatten all these boards. So that consists of making one wide rabbet on the jointer. It's going to establish a nice flat reference area, and then a platform can be added to the planer for the rabbet to ride along. The rabbeted area will reference off of that platform, go into the planer nice and smoothly, and that'll create a flat surface on the top side. Once I have that top side flattened out, I can turn the blank over and remove that excess bit of material next to the rabbet, and you'll have a nice wide flat blank ready to go. What's funny is that even though I have a 12-inch wide jointer, I actually end up using this method quite a bit. It works pretty easily, and if you're not flattening things constantly, it's not that big of a hassle to go through this. Now once everything is cleaned up through the planer, I'll give all the blanks a light sanding. That's going to remove any little fuzzies, or in my case back then I had straight knives in my planer. If I had any planer tracks, I'll remove those and make sure that when these blanks get cut up and glued together, there'll be nothing interfering with the glue surfaces coming together, ensuring a nice tight seam. Now with all that prep work done, it's time to finally cut these things up into the individual pieces that'll become the, the cutting boards. So I'll square off one end at the crosscut sled, and I can set a stop block for the thickness of the final board that I want, and then I can go crazy and just start cross-cutting all of these little blanks down into the individual parts, which will be glued up into the cutting boards. And after a ton of cross-cutting, that'll leave me with a whole stack of all these different blanks that I can then mix and match together to make the final boards. Since I'm going for a more random pattern, I'll grab pieces from all the different blanks, mix them together, and then there'd be essentially no discernible pattern because there's nothing repeating in the cutting board. So once I've decided on a final layout, I can apply glue to all that stuff and get them all glued together. Then I'll repeat that process until I've glued up all of my individual blanks. For flattening all this end grain, I like to use the router. It goes pretty quickly. You can take a pretty big bite if you need to, so you can do the entire flattening in one pass essentially. And then from there, I'll run it through the drum sander a few times to clean up any of the router marks and get a head start on the sanding. And then at this point, I decided that since I went through all this work to get to this point where all it needed were some finish sanding and some edge profiling and the handholds, I would just set them aside and, never finish them. So let's jump back to the future. Is that? Yeah, let's do that. So I'm going to start this off with the track saw. I'll put some kind of weird angle, arbitrary angle on here, and then I can take these over to the table saw and rip them into new strips. And what I'll do here is basically just use this as an opportunity to remove the cracked areas. So on this one, there's a crack that starts right here, kind of comes out to here and comes back out to the outside. So if I put the track on something, like this-ish, and then make that cut, that'll eliminate the cracked area. That'll be waste, and that'll get me started on the new angle for that cut. So I'm going to work through all the boards, make a randomly angled cut on all of them, and then we'll head over to the table saw, make some new strips, which I'll probably make at somewhat of a random width, and then we can mix and match, and oh boy, glue all these boards back together. And actually, before I head over to the bench with these, I'm just going to run them through the drum sander real quick to clean up both faces. That way I remove any saw marks or inconsistencies in the pieces that are due to the table saw. Easily the greatest consideration with the end grain cutting boards is just the consistency and tightness in the glue seams. And in order to achieve that, you really have to have very accurate, consistent parts, because any error you have in your parts can compound over every single strip you add to that glue up. So taking care of any potential issues that could cause any of those things to be messed up will make the end result quite a lot nicer. So you can probably see the chaos pattern starting to form, and it'll be a lot crazier as I start mixing and matching different blanks together, which I'll do in just a second. So I had 2 boards down here that I'm not going to be cutting up. So I have this big one down here which did not crack, so I'm just going to take it through the entire finishing process as a standard board. And I have this guy here, which was actually flattened and became too thin, so it's a lot thinner than the other ones. So I'm just going to kick that one out, and maybe I'll finish that into something. But so yeah, now I'm just going to go and doing some more glue ups again. I'm going to go ahead and just mix and match things from my stacks and find some kind of crazy patterns that look halfway decent. And it's just going to be the same thing as the last step. We're going to get some glue on here, get some cauls, get some clamps, get these things glued back together again, and then we'll see if we want to cut these things apart once again to make an even more chaotic pattern, which I'm leaning towards no at this point. Depends how many times you want to go through the same exact process. So I know I was just going to do one iteration of the chaos pattern, but I tend to get pulled in and sucked into these things. I think I'm going to do one more because it's just not quite to the chaotic pattern that I really want. I can see the lines too much. So I think what I'll do is I'm going to go through the entire process again. I'm going to make the angled cut on the long edge and then go ahead and rip these things back up into individual strips. While I'm at the table saw, I can use it to trim up all of the unevenness from my original cutting boards being different thicknesses, and run through the drum sander again, clean up the faces, and mix them all up and glue them back together, and hopefully the chaos will be enough. We'll see. So these are looking pretty good. I think I'm going to call it good at this point because I don't really want to iterate through that again, and I think this is chaotic enough. So at this point, it is time for the most important step, waiting. So I will let these things sit out here for 5 to 7 days and allow them to reacclimate and warp or do whatever they're going to do if they're going to do anything. So next week I'll come back out here and I'll flatten them real quick, give them a quick sanding through the drum sander, give them an actual sanding, do the edge profiling, add the handholds, and then it'll be time for finish. Now this waiting thing is one of the more important things that I learned over the years of making these things, because you essentially at this point you've taken a bunch of boards, turned them inside out, stood them up on end, so you really shuffled up the moisture content of that board, and it's really going to be all over the place. Especially if you were starting with wood in a transitional season where the outside is going to have a different moisture content than the inside, which we just exposed. The other big thing about this is that at this point we have dumped a ton of glue into this thing, and that brings with it a lot of moisture. So allowing these things to acclimate for a bit, release all the extra moisture from the glue, and equalize a little bit will allow them to warp now when it actually is easy to fix versus later after they're already flattened. This style of board that I make, the reversible two-sided board, needs to stay very stable, because if it does warp once it's finished, it'll be very noticeable because it won't sit flat on a counter anymore. If you're doing a one-sided board with some feet or something on it, if your board warps, if it cups or bows, it's not going to be a huge deal. If it twists, you'll notice it, but if it cups or bows, it won't be a huge deal. A two-sided board is going to be much more sensitive to any amount of movement. And these Endgrain boards are enough work to flatten. It's not fun to have to do it twice. Finally, time for finish. I think if you don't do these for a long time, you kind of forget how much work it is just to get to this point. And it is a ton of work. So I have my finish here, and I'm just going to flood that on, allow it to soak in as much as it's going to want to. Basically, I'll look on the underside, and when I start seeing finish coming through on that side, I flip it over and finish things up. So I've let these sit overnight so they are dried to the touch now, and I'm going to come through and apply a very light second coat. That second coat is going to sort of even out the look a little bit, since we have a lot of different pieces of wood which may absorb finish at different rates. This will just kind of even things out and make it look a lot more uniform. The trick here with this finish is not to create a film, so I'm not going to really leave any on the surface. I'll just wet the surface a little bit, let it sit for a few minutes, and then wipe off any excess so there isn't anything sitting on the surface curing. And lastly, I just give everything a light sanding with some 1000 grit sandpaper. That's going to smooth everything out and make them really nice to the touch. This is a tactile thing. People touch these things, and having them be nice and smooth is a pretty critical part in the final product. So I am really happy with the way these things turned out. The random chaotic pattern is definitely unique and very trippy as you're staring at it, looking at all these weird shapes and things coming together into one single board. It does make your head hurt just a little bit. Every year I donate something to the Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity's silent auction, and this year the Chaos boards went through those, so these were auctioned off and they raised $1,300 for the Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity, so that is super exciting. I am thrilled about that. So lastly, one of the sort of side effects of this Chaos board, which I didn't really comprehend until I did it, was the amount of waste and the amount of compaction. So if you remember from the beginning, these 3 boards started from 5 boards just like this one. So 5 boards like this, I guess here, 5 boards like that, 3 boards like that. So it's there's a lot of waste. But luckily enough, in my next video, we'll take these scraps that I generated from these boards and make some more cutting boards, because why not perpetuate the cycle? So make sure you check out my other video on making scraps well, scrap cutting boards from boards that were scrap and were made from scraps. So we're really iterating down that path. So thank you as always for watching. I greatly appreciate it. If any questions or comments on the cutting boards or anything here in my shop, please feel free to leave me a comment. As always, I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. And until next time, happy woodworking.